Hello, today is Thursday, August 7th, 2025, and yesterday Novo reported 18% sales growth, 29% growth in operating profit, and more than $22 billion in revenue for the first half of the year. But here's the twist. Despite all that growth, they lowered their full-year forecast. So why? Well, because they say GLP-1 growth is slowing in the United States, and one of the reasons, according to Novo, is compounded medications. Today on the Downsized, we're unpacking the biggest revelations from yesterday's Novo Nordisk earnings call, what they said, what they didn't, and what it all means for people like us who are using GLP-1s to treat the disease of obesity. It's an exciting day in the world of GLP-1s. We've got an earnings call yesterday from Novo Nordisk, one today from Eli Lilly. I like to take a little bit of time to distill them all. So today's conversation will be about yesterday's call with Novo Nordisk, and tomorrow we'll do one on Eli Lilly. And just a sneak peek, Lilly's got a lot of stuff to announce, so it should be exciting. So here's what we're talking about in this video. Why Novo says 1 million Americans using compounded GLP-1s is hurting their business. How CVS, telehealth, and new distribution models are shaping the future of access, and what this all means for patients just like us. Hello, my name is Christopher Durham, and this is The Downsized. My wife Lorraine and I have lost more than 150 pounds together using GLP-1s. We know what it means to fight for access, to search for affordability, and to look for answers when the healthcare system just doesn't make it easy. Before we get into the details, just a quick reminder. I'm not a doctor, not a lawyer, not a stock analyst. I'm a dad. I'm a husband. Lorraine and I have been married for 22 years. I'm just a regular guy. This is not medical advice. I'm just someone who listens carefully to the people making the decisions that affect all of us. If you need advice on your healthcare, please talk to your doctor and build a plan that works just for you. And of course, if you find this video helpful, please like and subscribe. It helps more people find this video, and it tells YouTube that patients matter too. All right, so let's get into it. We're reporting on Novo Nordisk's Q2 2025 earnings call, which happened yesterday, August 6th, and included commentary from CEO Lars Fruergaard Jørgensen, incoming CEO Mike Dudstad, CFO Karsten Munk-Knudsen, and other top Novo executives. This is what they said and why it matters. Novo Nordisk reported 18% growth in sales and 29% growth in operating profit for the first half of 2025. That's 154.9 billion Danish kroner in sales, or about 22.5 billion US. CEO Lars Fruergaard Jørgensen called it a strong half year, but admitted they had to lower their forecast for the rest of 2025. So of course, all the analysts on the call said, why? Well, according to Jørgensen, growth in the U.S. is slowing, especially for Wegovy and Ozempic. Quote, the change in sales outlook is driven by lower growth expectations for Wegovy in the United States obesity market, Ozempic in the U.S. diabetes market, and Wegovy in select IO markets. They're still making billions, but the warning light is flashing. During yesterday's earnings call, Dave Moore, Executive Vice President of North American Operations, made it official. It is estimated that around 1 million patients are on compounded GLP-1s in the United States. That's 1 million Americans turning to compounded alternatives, many of them because brand name options like Ozempic and Wegovy are either unaffordable or historically have been unavailable. Moore described it as unlawful mass compounding, and said some patients may not even realize they aren't receiving an FDA-approved drug. He accused some compounders of falsely advertising personalization while using unapproved semaglutide salts. He didn't stop there. There is nothing categorically off the table, Moore said, signaling a continued and potentially expanded push for federal enforcement. Novo's legal campaign has accelerated, though. As of August 5th, the company has filed 132 lawsuits in federal courts across 40 states, targeting what it calls illegal marketing and business practices tied to compounded semaglutides. Most recently, they filed 14, including one against Mochi, the telehealth company that we have used. And in fact, Lorraine and I were once again included in the discovery. And this time, they quoted me, in which I said, quoting myself, of course, I've used Zepbound Mounjaro and compounded tirzepatide, and they've all worked the same for me. And that is, in fact, my experience. So I stand by that. The lawsuits focus on two new areas: pharmacies allegedly compounding semaglutide under a guise of personalization, violating state pharmacy laws. Number two, telehealth companies allegedly allowing corporations, not doctors, to steer patients toward compounded alternatives, violating laws like California's ban on the corporate practice of medicine. This all comes from Novo's press release on the matter. Novo says this is about protecting patients, and to some extent that's true, especially in cases where unsafe or misrepresented ingredients are being sold. But there's a whole nother layer here that you and I know, the people who take these medications every day. What Novo isn't saying is affordability is driving compounding. Many patients aren't turning to compounded drugs out of preference. They're doing it out of necessity. The list price for Wegovy and Ozempic remains well over $1,000 per month, and even when insurance coverage exists, it often comes with delays, denials, or high out-of-pocket costs. And if you're on Medicare or Medicaid, you're ineligible for manufacturer coupons or savings programs. That alone cuts off millions of Americans from any sort of cost relief. This is where 503A compounding pharmacies have stepped in. These state-regulated, legally compliant pharmacies are permitted to prepare medications for individual patients with individual needs. They can adjust dosage or delivery format, omit inactive ingredients that patients may be allergic to. While some bad actors may exist, most compounding pharmacies are operating inside the law. They're in fact state-regulated. They are filling a gap that Novo and the broader healthcare system has left wide open. And patients should not be villainized for seeking care they can afford. It really leads to a different path, the case for a pricing reset. Novo's financials this quarter were strong, but the company lowered its full-year forecast, a rare move for a market leader, due in part to slowing U.S. growth and the rise of compounded alternatives. So here's the real opportunity. Instead of trying to litigate compounding out of existence, Novo could render it irrelevant with better pricing. Imagine if Novo slashed the list price of Wegovy and Ozempic to $199 a month. That price would undercut compounded versions, open the door to millions of cash pay patients, create a compelling case for employers and payers to expand access, and build long-term brand loyalty at a scale no court order could ever guarantee. Novo wouldn't just protect market share, they'd expand it. They could beat Lilly on price, volume, and public perception, especially with orforglipron and retatrutide looming in the background. A lower price could make Novo the value leader in the category, even if Zepbound has slightly better clinical results. The demand is there, the patients are waiting, and the market is shifting. Lowering the price would not be a concession, it would be a strategy, one that could drive unit growth, dollar profits, and long-term competitive advantage while restoring trust with patients who feel increasingly shut out of care. In July, CVS Caremark made Wegovy the exclusive GLP-1 for obesity on its national template formulary. Analysts asked, is it working? More said yes. We are pleased with what we're seeing so far. They wouldn't share numbers, but they hinted that prescription volumes are ticking up. Novo also said they expect to launch Ozempic in the cash channel via NovoCare later this year. So Novo has Wegovy in the Caremark formulary as a win, but they also still have compounded semaglutide holding its ground. Analysts asked about pricing, and Novo Nordisk's Chief Financial Officer Karsten Knudsen didn't dodge it. Wegovy price erosion is more skewed towards the second half of 2025, linked to growth in the cash channel. Translation, the cash pay market is putting pressure on their pricing. And that's not just speculation, it's baked into their financial guidance. They also admitted that only 10% of Wegovy prescriptions are currently coming through NovoCare Pharmacy. That's despite all their recent investment in direct-to-consumer advertising, their telehealth platform, and expanded partnerships. If the goal was to shift patients toward their vertically integrated cash solution, it's off to a slow start. Dave Moore, Novo's U.S. head, tried to strike a hopeful tone. He said they're encouraged by early indicators from the CVS formulary win and believe their recent commercial campaigns are starting to gain traction, but the numbers speak for themselves. The uptake through NovoCare isn't where they hoped it would be. That's the market Novo desperately wants to reclaim. Why? Because in the US, brand name GLP-1s aren't always covered. We all know that. And in fact, most of the time they're not covered. And that means patients are looking for alternatives. Cash payers want affordability, convenience, and clear access. And right now, they're still waiting for Novo's to deliver. So when we talk about price erosion, we're really talking about leverage. Novo knows that if patients have other options, they have a choice. And when patients have choices, manufacturers can't charge whatever they want. That's the pressure point. And it's why Novo is investing so heavily in direct-to-consumer marketing, telehealth, and its own pharmacy channel. Because winning in the cash market isn't just about messaging, it's about trust, cost, and actual delivery. So let's talk about Novo's innovation pipeline. The headline grabber is amycretin. In early trials, this once-weekly GLP-1 GIP glucagon triple agonist showed impressive results, up to 24.3% weight loss at 36 weeks in the highest dose group. That's the kind of data that puts it squarely in competition with Lilly's retatrutide. Novo is moving amycretin into a major phase 3 development program called AMAZE. Launching in early 2026, the AMAZE trials will test both subcutaneous and oral formulations across a wide range of obesity-related comorbidities, including atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, heart failure, chronic kidney disease, obstructive sleep apnea, knee osteoarthritis, and of course obesity. Novo's strategy here is clear: diversify the indication base and reach patient populations beyond traditional weight loss. The idea isn't just to match Lilly's weight loss data, it's to differentiate based on comorbidity benefits, tolerability, and delivery options. Meanwhile, CagriSema, Novo's combination of cagrilintide and semaglutide, is being pushed forward as well. The company recently initiated REDEFINE 11, a phase 3B trial designed to evaluate re-escalation of dose and longer-term weight outcomes. And while we're on the topic of dosing, let's talk about high-dose semaglutide. Novo has quietly submitted semaglutide 7.2 milligrams to the European Medicines Agency, a step-up formulation that could serve as a more potent version of Wegovy for patients who plateau or need stronger interventions. But here's what's surprising: there's been no mention of a US launch for this higher dose, despite the fact that millions of American patients are struggling to access effective and affordable weight loss options. Novo has not disclosed any plans to file with the FDA. That silence is notable and it raises questions. Is the US market simply too price sensitive, or are they holding off to avoid cannibalizing Wegovy sales at the current dose? Either way, not bringing high-dose semaglutide to the US, at least not yet, feels like a missed opportunity for both Novo's business and for patients who need more robust tools in their fight against obesity. In terms of pricing, Novo hasn't said much publicly, but based on recent analyst conversations, amycretin is expected to launch at a premium, likely above Ozempic and Wegovy, and potentially even above Lilly's retatrutide, depending on formulation and delivery method. However, there's growing speculation that Novo may try to carve out a competitive cash pay strategy, especially for oral amycretin. If the company can hit a compelling cash price for a daily oral GLP-1 that delivers double-digit weight loss, it could unlock a major direct-to-consumer opportunity. And that's key. NovoCare Pharmacy, their direct platform, could serve as the launch pad for these newer drugs. Imagine a future where patients can get oral amycretin directly from Novo's ecosystem without insurance barriers, PBM upcharges, prior authorizations, or delays. That kind of access could reshape the obesity care market, especially for patients paying out of pocket. Novo is also watching the oral segment very closely. With the success of Rybelsus and the upcoming oral version of amycretin, they're positioning themselves to compete for patients who prefer pills over injection. And let's not forget the cardiovascular space. Novo believes semaglutide already leads on heart outcomes. Martin Lange, their head of R&D, reminded investors semaglutide through SUSTAIN-6 has shown a 26% CV risk reduction. This is to date unsurpassed in the incretin space. In short, Novo is building a multi-front defense: high-efficacy injectables, oral GLP-1s, comorbidity coverage, and new indications that could bring their portfolio into cardiology, nephrology, and beyond. The big question now is, can they launch fast enough and price smart enough to stay ahead of competitors and regain the trust of patients who feel priced out of their medications today? International sales were up 19% in constant currency. Wegovy sales in international operations grew 125%, a massive number. But analysts flagged slower growth in China, a key market for future expansion. Mike Dudstard, who officially becomes CEO on August 7th, responded directly to those concerns. He insisted we are not losing market share, actually the opposite. He blamed recent sluggishness on wholesaler destocking and emphasized that Novo is still growing faster than its competitors. To regain momentum, Dudstard outlined a strategy focused on expanding reach into China's Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities and accelerating Novo's digital and online presence. He added, "What works in Beijing won't necessarily work in Chengdu. We're tailoring our approach." He also reiterated his data-driven approach. He will prioritize based on facts, not assumptions. That means reallocating resources, building on our strengths, and not hesitating to make tough calls. On transforming the business for growth, he said, "We must think more like a tech company, agile, innovative, and fast. Speed is going to be our competitive advantage." And on his personal motivation, Dudstard said, "Execution is not a slogan for me. It's how I work. It's what I expect from our teams." He summed up his leadership style in one line: "I have been put into this position because I execute." Dudstard said he plans to double down on allocation of resources to the fastest growing markets, reprioritize commercial investments, and reshape the portfolio where needed. As he put it, "We are moving from potential to performance, from promise to proof." The transition from Lars Fruergaard Jorgensen to Mike Dudstard marks more than just a personnel change. It signals what could be a cultural shift, or at least that's what they wanted you to believe on this call. Granted, Dudstard has been under the Novo Nordisk umbrella for the last couple of decades, so it remains to be seen how different he really is. The pressure is now on to sustain growth, not just abroad, but across the globe, while navigating rising competition, pricing scrutiny, and questions of long-term access. Some additional insight into Novo's U.S. commercial strategy came from media reporting following the call. According to coverage from Endpoints News, Novo is accelerating its push into direct-to-consumer channels for Wegovy. This includes investments in advertising, telehealth, and the Novo Care platform. While these efforts reportedly grew U.S. cash pay prescriptions from 4% to 10% since January 2025, uptake, as we mentioned earlier, has still been slower than expected. While those specifics were not shared during the earnings call itself, CEO Karsten Knudsen did confirm in the call that price erosion is expected in the second half of 2025 due to growth in the cash channel. Off the call, Knudsen told reporters that price cuts may be necessary to make Wegovy more attractive for cash-paying patients and to reduce friction for insured individuals. So price cuts could be good for both the cash-paying patients and insured. Now it's up to Mike to take the wheel, and if his comments on the call are any indication, he's promising less talk and more execution. The question is, will it be enough to fend off Lilly, calm investors, and win back frustrated patients? Mike, if you're out there watching, we'd love to have you join us on the Downsized to talk about your plans for the future, to talk about patient care, to talk about pricing. This stage can be yours if you'd like it. Let's turn to one of the biggest competitive narratives in obesity care today, heart health. At the end of July, Eli Lilly released top-line results from its Surpass CVOT trial, a massive cardiovascular outcome study comparing tirzepatide or Mounjaro to dulaglutide, Trulicity, in patients with type 2 diabetes and established cardiovascular disease. The result: non-inferiority. Tirzepatide met the primary endpoint by showing that it was not worse than dulaglutide in reducing major adverse cardiovascular events, or MACE. But it didn't show superiority either, and that left the door open for Novo Nordisk to reinforce its leadership on hard outcomes. During the Q2 earnings call, Martin Lang, Novo's EVP of Development, put it plainly: semaglutide through SUSTAIN 6 has shown a 26% CV risk reduction. This is to date unsurpassed in the incretin space. That was no coincidence. Novo is actively working to shape the narrative that semaglutide, not tirzepatide, is the gold standard when it comes to cardiometabolic protection. And they have data to back it up. In the SUSTAIN 6 trial, semaglutide showed a 26% reduction in major CV events. In the FLOW trial, it demonstrated a 24% reduction in risk of kidney disease progression. And in other studies, semaglutide has been linked to meaningful improvements in peripheral arterial disease and heart failure symptoms. Novo's making it clear, if the conversation shifts from weight loss to heart health, they believe they win. Lilly still holds the edge on raw weight loss efficacy, especially with retatrutide, but Novo is betting that for many providers, particularly cardiologists and nephrologists, cardiovascular outcomes will carry more clinical weight than a few extra pounds lost. And honestly, they're betting insurance will cover it. That's why they're expanding their label claims, initiating new trials, and reminding everyone that GLP-1s aren't just about the scale, they're about the heart, the kidneys, and long-term survival. Expect this rivalry to heat up even more as both companies seek broader approvals, push into primary care, and court payers with head-to-head outcomes data. Novo may not lead on total weight loss, but in the battle for the heart, they're staking their claim. If you're watching this, you may not care about quarterly earnings or stock tickers, but you should care about what was said on this call because it affects what you pay, what your doctors can prescribe, and whether you can afford to stay on a GLP-1 long term. Novo didn't lower their guidance because of market noise. They lowered it because real people are making real choices about what they can afford, where they can get it, and how long they can stay on treatment. More than 1 million people have turned to alternative access channels. That didn't happen by accident. It happened because access is still unequal, because brand name medications are still out of reach for too many people. And while Novo Nordisk is playing defense, trying to catch up in the cash market and keep control of its pricing, Eli Lilly is playing offense. Zepbound is beating Wegovy in prescription growth, Mounjaro is outperforming Ozempic in new starts, and Lilly Direct is already ahead of NovoCare in terms of reach and usability. Lilly's strategy is bold. Novo knows it. That's why they're ramping up direct-to-consumer ads. That's why they're talking about cash channel erosion, pricing's getting lower, and telehealth growth. And they're reacting to a shift in power, and that power is coming from you. Patients now have more influence than ever before. You're not just a number on a chart. You are the market. Your decisions are driving how these companies respond, where they invest, and how they price their medications. So if you've ever felt invisible in this system, if you've ever struggled to get your medication or fought to stay on it, know this: your choices are reshaping the landscape. Novo is chasing the cash channel now because patients made it matter. Don't forget that. So the real question, what happens now? Novo has a new CEO. Mike Dudstart officially takes over this week, and the pressure is already on. He inherits a company with blockbuster drugs, world-class science, and sky-high expectations, but also a company that's trailing Lilly in consumer trust, direct access, and innovation speed. And let's not forget the numerous other companies that are chasing and trying to catch up. If Mike wants to lead Novo into its next era, he'll need to move quickly and decisively. That means launching new medications faster, scaling access globally, slashing cash prices so patients aren't forced to walk away, and listening, really listening to the patients who have carried this market forward. Here's what patients need to see now. Here's what I want to see now. The cash prices of Ozempic and Wegovy should be immediately reduced to $199 per month, every dose, every day. Insurance should be expanded as much as possible, and I know you guys are working on that. Higher doses of semaglutide and oral versions should be launched without delay. A firm public launch timeline for CagriSema should be announced now, not later. And Novo should aggressively position itself to lead the global fight against obesity with urgency, affordability, and patient-first transparency. Novo Nordisk has the opportunity to be the hero in this story. They already have the science. What they need now is bold leadership. Not just more ads, not just more lawsuits, but real action. Because here's the truth. They can beat Lilly. They can beat the other manufacturers nipping at their heels. They can increase their sales, their volume, and their dollar profits. They can grow, they can win. And done right, they can be the hero to millions of people around the world trying to fight the disease of obesity. Patients don't need a monopoly. They need a partner. Someone who sees them, hears them, and delivers medications they can afford and stay on. Like Doodstar, you have a choice to make. Will Novo keep trying to control the market, or will you finally lead? The next chapter is unwritten, but we'll be watching. At the Downsized, we'll keep watching these earnings calls, these price moves, and these policy shifts because for patients treating the disease of obesity, the stakes couldn't be higher. Lilly's call is this morning, and we'll be covering all of that in detail tomorrow. So make sure you catch that. What happens in the boardroom impacts what happens at the pharmacy counter and what happens in your home. It shapes whether people can start treatment or stay on it. If you're here, you know how hard this can be. You know the cost, the obstacles, the fear of losing access to something that finally works. But we're asking you to be part of this conversation. Like this video, subscribe to our channel, and drop a comment below. My name is Christopher Durham, and we are The Downsized. I'll see you tomorrow, and we'll talk about Lilly. Thanks for watching.